Jen Holler, thanks so much for being here with me today. I'll let you introduce yourself and then we can jump into the conversation about recent money for housing.
Sounds great. Hi, Maura. Jen Holler, and I'm the Policy Director for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. And VHCB is a quasi-state agency, and through VHCB, the state provides funding for housing capital and housing development. And our mission is to create and support affordable housing across the state.
And so that's why I wanted you here to talk about the recent investments that the state has been making in housing. We know that last year when the stimulus bill was passed last spring, that the governor proposed almost a quarter of the state's resources go toward housing. And the legislature has begun to allocate that, much of it going to VHCB. Could you tell us a little bit about how much money has been provided so far?
Sure. So in recognition of the fact that the pandemic really made homelessness much more visible, sort of the official numbers doubled from the point in time that was done just before COVID-19 arrived in Vermont. And also in recognition of the underlying shortage of affordable housing that really exacerbated the housing challenges for people who were either homeless or at risk, the legislature, with the support of the governor, did target a substantial number of pandemic-related resources to housing and housing development during the last session. So there was a combined 144 million that was directed to creating housing through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board as a result of actions taken by the 2021 legislature. That funding comprises a few different sources. Some was from the ARPA state fiscal recovery funds that you just mentioned. The state also, because revenues were running strong and the needs were great, targeted supplemental general funds, state general funds for housing development as well.
It's incredible. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about the process of applying for that money and how you decided what would be eligible. And so what's VHCB been doing to design how it's going to spend these resources?
Well, we know the needs out there are great, so we've been trying to stand this up as quickly as possible. And we are fortunate in that VHCB has provided affordable housing funding for really 3 decades, so we could build on an existing internal capacity and the ability of the nonprofit network as well as private developers out there who would be applying for the funds. So essentially, a nonprofit or private housing developer submits an application to VHCB for some of the funding, and our staff reviews those applications, underwrites them, actually much like a bank might, looking at all different aspects of a project, then makes recommendations to the VHCB board. And our board comprises citizen members as well as yourself and members of the administration that are appointed by the governor. And then the board acts on those staff recommendations and decides which projects to fund.
And I know you did a lot of public outreach, and there have been ongoing public meetings that you've held and are still going to hold, asking folks about what are the targeted areas that should be invested in. Do you want to touch on a few of those?
Sure, absolutely. So we had a couple public information sessions this summer that provided information around the what the funding could be used for, who is eligible, and what the priorities are. We'll have another public information session on October 12th, the afternoon, with updates. And we have been getting a steady stream of phone calls, as you can imagine, and responding to those about people who are interested. And then also, this has been a really significant and important piece of our work, is that we've been working through what's been dubbed the Housing Recovery Working Group, which is where we get together with VHFA and then all the other state housing funders, including the Agency of Human Services, Department of Housing and Community Development, and the State Housing Authority, to coordinate the use of these funds as well as to help get the word out and encourage applications. Also, at times when we know there's a particular need in the community, we'll go to that community and encourage applications. And all of this work is done in particularly close coordination with the Agency of Human Services. That's helping us assess the applications in terms of where are the greatest needs, where are the greatest number of households who are still temporarily in motels, or where the local continuums of care are really highlighting a shortage of units. So it's a very long answer, but.
No, but it goes to speak to the collaboration and the partnership that's being done across state government and with quasi agencies like VHCB, and how much public feedback and needs and data are all informing this process. We're talking now late September, so I know that these numbers will change, but as of now, how much of this money has already been committed?
So of the ARPA state fiscal recovery funds specifically, we were appropriated $64 million, and by the end of September, we anticipate that about $25 million of that will be awarded to projects. I would say of the overall funding provided, so that's a combination of the state funds and the federal funds, the VHCB thus far has awarded or allocated about a third of that to projects around the state. The first projects that were funded really emphasize those that could be done relatively quickly, get stood up quickly, with an emphasis on making new homes available for those who are experiencing homelessness. But we also know that there's the underlying challenge of shortage of housing across income levels, and the applications that we're receiving now have those that are dedicated primarily to the homeless, but also at a variety of income levels.
And I know there's additional challenges, workforce shortages, cost of materials and construction going high. So this is a hard time to be doing this work in many regards. I guess I'm curious to conclude about what does the future hold? I know a lot of people are wondering how long will this money last, or what are the next sort of benchmarks that we can look forward to?
Well, so that's a very important thing to talk about. And our next funding round will come in January, and we have heard from many as 35 or 40 housing developers with proposals that they may be bringing forward at that time. There's a broad range of types of projects. It may not be that all of those actually do get submitted, but from increasing shelter capacity to mixed income housing, the home ownership opportunities are really a broad range of possibilities there. So we're eager to see those. We anticipate that the ARPA funding will probably get applications that would use all of that, if not by January, then by later in spring of next year. We know that we're making tremendous progress, and really an unprecedented number of units have come online in the last little bit. For example, I can let you know that since the pandemic began, a total of 475 new homes have been made available for occupancy, and 269 of those are specifically designated for those who are experiencing homelessness.
Wow.
Based on what we expect to fund by the end of September, we project that by the end of 2022, another 386 units will be available, 190 of those for those experiencing homelessness, and by the end of 2023, an additional 297. So if you are to look at the period from January 2020 to the end of 2023, based on what's been funded thus far, that's 1,158 new homes. So homes are being brought online at an unprecedented level. Unfortunately, it still is not sufficient to the need. There are other things that are happening in the market, whether it's short-term rentals or more pressure on housing development, people buying properties and then raising rents, making them less affordable, that are also impacting what's actually available in communities. But there's been a tremendous amount of work and success so far, but we all need to keep at it. And even with this substantial amount of funding, given the level of need and the underlying shortage, I'm sorry that I am not able to say once we get done allocating this money and the projects are completed that homelessness is going to be solved.
Yeah. Well, it's important work, and these resources are really going to change the trajectory of what we've been seeing, but I know that the work isn't done. And so thank you and VHCB for stewarding these resources and working in such great partnership with so many others. And I look forward to seeing all those units come online and the housing landscape really change dramatically for the better.
It really has, and I really would like to say that we really appreciate the partnership with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency. You personally, Maura, and our colleagues at the Department of Housing and Community Development and the Agency of Human Services, as well as the State Housing Authority, because we have a significant piece of the initial funding, but most of these projects cannot advance without additional resources from your agencies and coordination. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Jen. I appreciate your time.